evil piece of flesh demon. These were the words Reagan Simmons-Hancock's mother used to describe Taylor Rene Parker in court, the woman who murdered her pregnant daughter and cut her unborn baby from her womb in one of the most horrific crimes Texas has ever seen. On November 9, 2022, a jury sentenced Parker to death, making her one of only 6 women on Texas death row. But the question that haunts everyone who knows this case is simple. How does someone fake a pregnancy for 10 months and then murder their friend to steal her baby? If you're new to The Only Witness, welcome to the channel where we bring you the most shocking true crime cases that America can't stop talking about. Before we dive into Taylor Parker's elaborate web of lies and the brutal murder that ended 2 innocent lives, make sure you smash that like button, subscribe with notifications on, and comment below where you're watching from. Texas, California, Florida, New York. We want to hear from our true crime family across all 50 states. This is the story of a woman so desperate to keep her boyfriend that she faked an entire pregnancy, held a gender reveal party, posted fake ultrasounds on social media, and when her lies were about to be exposed, she murdered a young mother and tried to steal her baby. This is the story of Taylor Parker, and the question isn't whether she deserves death row, it's whether execution is justice enough for what she did. Taylor Rene Parker was 27 years old in 2020, living in Sims, Texas, a small town near the Oklahoma border. She was dating Wade Griffin, a man she was desperate to keep in her life. Wade wanted children, wanted to start a family, and Taylor knew that having his baby was the key to keeping him. There was just one problem. Taylor Parker wasn't pregnant. But that didn't stop her from telling Wade that she was. In late 2019, Taylor told Wade she was expecting their baby. Wade was thrilled. This was exactly what he wanted, and it seemed like their relationship was finally moving forward. But Taylor had made a decision that would eventually lead to murder. She was going to fake this pregnancy for as long as it took to figure out how to actually get a baby. For 10 months, Taylor Parker committed to the most elaborate pregnancy hoax imaginable. She bought fake pregnancy bellies and wore them religiously, making sure to adjust the size as the months progressed. She created fake ultrasound images using photo editing software and showed them to Wade, her family, and her friends. She posted about her pregnancy journey on social media, sharing updates about cravings, symptoms, and excitement about becoming a mother. In March 2020, Taylor and Wade held a gender reveal party. Their friends Cody and Stephanie Ott hosted the event, and Taylor had Wade bring a heifer with a pink bow to reveal that they were having a girl. The party was elaborate, with decorations, food, and dozens of guests celebrating the couple's upcoming arrival. Everyone believed Taylor was pregnant. Wade had no reason to doubt her. She looked pregnant, acted pregnant, and seemed genuinely excited about their baby girl. Her family threw her baby showers. Friends gave her gifts and advice. Taylor had created a completely convincing illusion. But as the months passed and her supposed due date approached, Taylor faced an impossible problem. She needed to produce an actual baby. Taylor began researching online, searching for answers to her desperate situation. Investigators would later find her search history filled with disturbing queries. How to fake a pregnancy? How long can you fake a pregnancy? Fake ultrasound images, and most chillingly, how to induce labor. But Taylor wasn't looking to induce her own labor. She was looking for someone else's baby to steal. That's when Taylor found Reagan Simmons-Hancock. Reagan was 21 years old, married to her husband Homer Keegan Hancock, and 9 months pregnant with their first child, a baby girl they planned to name Braxlynn. Reagan was beautiful, kind, and excited to become a mother. She and her husband lived in New Boston, Texas, and were counting down the days until their daughter's arrival. Reagan had met Taylor through mutual connections in their small Texas community. Taylor had befriended Reagan specifically because she was pregnant. Prosecutors would later prove that Taylor had been searching for potential victims, looking for pregnant women who were close to their due dates. Before we continue with the horrific events of October 9, 2020, make sure you're subscribed to The Only Witness and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. This case gets even more disturbing from here, and you won't want to miss how this elaborate lie turned into one of Texas's most brutal murders. On the morning of October 9, 2020, Taylor Parker drove to Reagan Simmons-Hancock's home in New Boston. She had told Wade that she had a doctor's appointment that morning, maintaining the illusion of her pregnancy until the very end. But Taylor wasn't going to a doctor. She was going to commit murder. Taylor arrived at Reagan's house around 9 a.m., claiming she was there to help Reagan prepare for the baby's arrival. Reagan, trusting and friendly, let Taylor into her home. What happened next was so brutal, so horrific, that even experienced law enforcement officers who investigated the scene were traumatized by what they saw. Taylor attacked Reagan in her own home, beating and strangling the young mother. The attack was vicious and sustained. Reagan fought for her life and for her unborn baby's life, but Taylor was determined. Medical examiners would later testify that Reagan suffered over 100 stab wounds in the brutal assault. Once Reagan was dead or dying, Taylor did the unthinkable. She used a scalpel to cut baby Braxlynn from Reagan's womb. The baby was pulled from her mother's body at around 35 weeks gestation. She was alive when Taylor cut her free, but she had been deprived of oxygen and suffered catastrophic injuries. Taylor wrapped the baby and fled the scene, leaving Reagan's mutilated body in her own home. Taylor then did something that revealed the depths of her delusion. She drove to a hospital in Oklahoma with baby Braxlynn, claiming she had just given birth and needed medical attention. At the hospital, medical staff immediately knew something was wrong. Taylor showed no signs of having just given birth, no postpartum bleeding, no physical trauma, nothing that would indicate she had delivered a baby. The baby was in critical condition, covered in blood and clearly in need of emergency care. While doctors worked desperately to save baby Braxlynn's life, they began asking Taylor questions about the birth. Her story didn't make sense. She claimed to have given birth in a car, but there was no evidence of that. The baby's umbilical cord had been crudely cut, and there were signs of trauma that didn't match a normal delivery. Hospital staff called police, and Taylor was detained for questioning. Meanwhile, back in New Boston, Reagan's mother had gone to check on her daughter. What she found would haunt her for the rest of her life. Reagan was lying in a pool of blood, her body brutally mutilated, her baby gone. The scene was so horrific that Reagan's mother called 911 in a state of complete shock and grief, barely able to explain what she was seeing. Police immediately launched a massive investigation. When they learned about a woman at a hospital in Oklahoma claiming to have just given birth, they connected the dots instantly. Taylor Parker was arrested and charged with capital murder and kidnapping. Baby Braxlynn, despite doctors' desperate efforts to save her, died shortly after arrival at the hospital. She had been deprived of oxygen for too long and had suffered injuries that were incompatible with life. Taylor had murdered Reagan Simmons-Hancock and her unborn baby Braxlynn, all to maintain a lie about a fake pregnancy. The investigation revealed the full scope of Taylor's deception. Detectives found her fake pregnancy bellies, her doctored ultrasound images, and her extensive online searches about faking pregnancy and finding pregnant women. They discovered that Taylor had been planning this for months, researching potential victims and figuring out how to steal a baby. Wade Griffin was devastated. The man who thought he was about to become a father learned that not only had his girlfriend never been pregnant, but she had murdered a young mother and her baby in an attempt to produce a child to present to him. Wade testified at trial, describing his complete shock and betrayal. Taylor's trial began in September 2022 and lasted for weeks. The prosecution presented a mountain of evidence: her fake pregnancy materials, her search history, witness testimony about her lies, and most damning of all, forensic evidence that proved she had murdered Reagan and cut Braxlynn from her womb. The defense had almost nothing to work with. Taylor had confessed to faking the pregnancy, and the physical evidence against her was overwhelming. The only question was whether she would face life in prison or the death penalty. On October 3, 2022, after less than 2 hours of deliberation, the jury found Taylor Parker guilty of capital murder in the deaths of Reagan Simmons-Hancock and baby Braxlynn Hancock. The sentencing phase lasted 25 days, with testimony from 142 witnesses. Reagan's family described their devastating loss and the horror of knowing that someone had brutally murdered their daughter and granddaughter. They called Taylor evil, a monster, a demon who deserved the ultimate punishment. On November 9, 2022, the jury sentenced Taylor Rene Parker to death. Reagan's mother addressed Taylor directly in court, calling her an evil piece of flesh demon and saying that death was too good for what she had done. Drop a comment right now telling us where you're watching from and whether you think Taylor Parker deserves the death penalty for this horrific crime. We want to hear from viewers in every state. What do you think is justice for Reagan and baby Braxlynn? Taylor Parker is currently 32 years old and is housed on death row at the Mountain View unit in Gatesville, Texas, home to the state's female death row inmates. She is one of only 6 women currently under sentence of death in Texas. Life on death row for female inmates is isolating and harsh. Taylor is confined to her cell for most of the day, with limited opportunities for recreation or social interaction. She is allowed visitors but under strict supervision. She can make phone calls and write letters, but her communication with the outside world is heavily monitored. Texas has not executed a woman since 2014. When Suzanne Basso was put to death for the torture and murder of a mentally disabled man. Before that, the last woman executed in Texas was in 2005. Female executions are extremely rare. Since 1976, only 18 women have been executed in the United States out of more than 1,500 total executions. This means that while Taylor Parker has been sentenced to death, the reality is that she may spend decades on death row before facing execution, if she is ever executed at all. Taylor's legal team is currently working on her appeals. They are challenging various aspects of her trial and conviction, arguing that she did not receive a fair trial and that mitigating factors should have prevented a death sentence. These appeals will likely continue for many years. The main arguments her attorneys are making include mental health. They argue that Taylor was suffering from severe mental illness and delusional thinking when she committed the crime, and that this should have been considered as a mitigating factor. Age and background. At 27, Taylor had no prior criminal history, and her lawyers argue that her age and lack of prior violence should have resulted in a life sentence rather than death. Disproportionate punishment. They argue that the death penalty is disproportionate punishment, especially considering how rarely women are executed in Texas. But prosecutors and Reagan's family argue that the brutality of the crime, the premeditation, and the complete lack of remorse justify the death penalty. They point out that Taylor spent months planning this murder, that she specifically targeted a pregnant woman, and that she showed no mercy to Reagan or baby Braxlynn. The question of whether Taylor Parker will actually be executed remains unanswered. The appeals process for death penalty cases typically takes 10 to 15 years or longer, and many death row inmates die of natural causes before their execution date arrives. If Taylor is executed, she will likely not request a final meal. Texas eliminated the special last meal tradition in 2011 after a death row inmate ordered an elaborate meal and then refused to eat it. Now, condemned inmates receive the same meal that is being served to other inmates in their unit that day. As for last words, if Taylor were to be executed, she would be given the opportunity to make a final statement from the gurney before the lethal injection begins. What would she say? Would she apologize to Reagan's family? Would she maintain her innocence? Would she explain why she committed such an unimaginable crime? We won't know unless and until that day comes. But what we do know is that Reagan Simmons-Hancock will never get to raise her daughter. Baby Braxlynn will never take her first steps, say her first words, or live the life she should have had. Keegan Hancock lost both his wife and his daughter in one horrific act of violence. Reagan's mother will never stop seeing the image of her daughter's mutilated body. And all of this happened because Taylor Parker was so desperate to keep her boyfriend that she faked a pregnancy for 10 months and then murdered an innocent young mother to steal her baby. The case raises disturbing questions about how far people will go to maintain lies, about the warning signs of dangerous behavior that were missed, and about what justice looks like for such an unimaginable crime. Reagan's family has stated that they hope Taylor Parker suffers on death row for the rest of her life, whether that ends in execution or natural death decades from now. They want her to think every day about what she did, about the lives she destroyed, about the baby girl who never got to grow up. As we close out this devastating story, make sure you've hit that like button and subscribed to The Only Witness. Drop a comment below telling us where you're watching from one more time and let us know. Is the death penalty justice for Taylor Parker, or should she have received life in prison? We want to hear from viewers in all 50 states about this controversial case. Taylor Parker's case reminds us that evil can hide behind a friendly smile and that desperate people are capable of unimaginable cruelty. Her 10-month lie became a death sentence, not just for her, but for two innocent people who did nothing wrong except trust the wrong person. Reagan Simmons-Hancock was 21 years old, full of life and excited to become a mother. Baby Braxlynn never got the chance to live at all. Their deaths were senseless, brutal, and completely preventable. If Taylor had simply told the truth about not being pregnant, Wade Griffin might have been disappointed. Their relationship might have ended. But Reagan and Braxlynn would still be alive. Instead, Taylor chose murder. She chose to take a scalpel to Reagan's home and cut a baby from her womb. She chose to try to pass off someone else's dying baby as her own. And now, she sits on death row in Texas, waiting to see if the state will ultimately take her life as punishment for the lives she took. Thank you for watching this difficult episode of The Only Witness. If this case moved you, please share it with others who follow true crime. Don't forget to comment your state and your thoughts on Taylor Parker's death sentence one final time before you go. Until next time, this is The Only Witness, reminding you that lies have consequences, and that the truth is always better than the deadliest deception. Stay safe out there. This is The Only Witness, signing off.